Well, hello! So many people come to hear my stories and songs that I can't be sure if you're a regular or new to this whole thing. So, welcome, or welcome back! I am Aster Fortuna, Bard extraordinaire, and you have the great honor and fortune of listening to my beautiful voice for a while. If you're new to our story, you're in luck. You've missed an awful lot of exciting adventures and action, but I'm going to fill you in on everything you missed. Up through episode 40, which was the end of season 1. Of course, if you're planning to go back and listen from the beginning, and really, you should do that, then you should stop listening to me now. I know it is hard to resist my dulcet tones, but resist you must. Or perhaps you could listen to part of this summary and decide whether you'd like to go back to the beginning. I leave it up to your good judgment. If you've already listened to every episode, well, you're not going to get much out of this, aside from being able to listen to me, of course. But you might find a recapitulation of the events of the story so far to be very valuable. In episode 65, our heroes give a new companion a crude explanation of events. But let's be honest with ourselves. They just don't tell the story with style. And they leave out so many important details, especially about me. How could you do that? So, let's start at the beginning, with the basic facts of history. We come from a world encased in glass. It seems natural to us, but you might be surprised to learn that our world is flat. We can look up from anywhere in the world and see the glass wall sloping upward, narrowing toward the ring at the top that we call the sun. It brightens during the day and dims at night. There's a sort of lens high up on the wall that people say the gods used to look through. But we didn't put much stock in that. We didn't believe in gods. The first people of our world awoke 2,000 years ago on an island we call Arrival, in the middle of the world, lying on canvas tarps suspended from tall pillars. These first people, elves, dwarves, orcs, halflings, humans, and so on, awoke with innate knowledge of skills and trades, and created a society. In the middle of their island city, there was an enormous glass container, and whenever a being died, its soul drifted towards this jar and was sucked inside. The soul jar was a mystery and a monument known across the world. Eventually, the residents of Arrival crossed the sea around the island and discovered the world beyond, finding that the seas were fed by 4 great rivers that fell out of holes high up in the glass. The early explorers also found 4 enormous stone numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, lying facing upward toward the sky, each in a quadrant of our world. Settlements arose around these numbers, forming 4 nations: the Free Cities, a loose alliance of independent city-states full of farmers and artisans; the Magistracy, a land of wizards and sorcerers run by a council of powerful arcane spellcasters; the Great Forest, it's a big forest. It has a lot of elves and druids, and you get the picture; and the Iron Empire, a warlike nation, rich in metal resources, but with a tendency toward autocracy and prone to bullying its neighbors. And of course, there was still Arrival, which, by the way, was the land that I, Aster Fortuna, called home. That's a lot of boring history though, right? Don't worry, friends, now it gets interesting. About 50 years ago, one of the rivers, the God's River, known for sometimes having healing powers, stopped working reliably. It just started spurting irregularly instead of flowing, and it got worse as time went by. This started having some pretty dire consequences for the farmers of the Free Cities, as you can imagine, and it changed weather patterns too. The God's River became known as the Broken River, and that's where our story comes in. Starting with the courageous and persuasive Terradane. The Dane family are nobles from Arrival and successful merchants. The breaking of the God's River started impacting the family business. Those grain shipments weren't coming in as reliably as they once did. Tara Dane decided to investigate, so she hopped on a ship with her childhood friend, the brilliant gnome wizard Finn McCaspinner, or Finn to his friends. Tara is no slouch either. By the way, I mean, she's not brilliant, but she's just about the toughest human warrior you'll ever meet. A true adventurer. Tara and Finn arrived in the Free Cities and hired a local cleric by the name of Paxton as a guide, a big, burly, bearded guy who's quick with a joke, but a little secretive and anxious. They took a job transporting a wagon full of grain that was headed in the direction they wanted to go, and set out toward the Broken River. Along the way, they had some interesting diversions. They noticed that they were being followed by a wizard in a great cloak, but weren't sure what to do about it. They encountered a strange blob-like creature trying to eat a farmer's hay and destroyed it. They helped some farmers who had been kidnapped by goblins and had their cows poisoned, though the hobgoblin leader escaped. They even ran into some bandits desperate for food and took them down. Oh, and Paxton got his hands on a magical glass steel sword the goblins had been using. Glass steel is made out of glass, taken from the walls of the world. Most people consider it poor form and dangerous to use such a weapon. And Paxton found out why. The weapon was cursed. It made Paxton into an overbearing, unfriendly jerk. Fortunately, Finn managed to persuade some traveling dwarfs to rush him and knock the sword out of his hand. Eventually, they reached a town called New Tower on the border between the Free Cities and the Magistracy, right next to the bridge crossing what was left of the Broken River. Tara and Paxton left the cart and Finn behind in the town to take a look at the Broken River. Finn took the opportunity to look up some spells in the library and was confronted by the wizard in the gray cloak who had been following them. His name was Atolf, and he explained that his job was to keep secrets. He had heard that Finn and Tara had come from a rival and were poking around, and he wanted to make sure they didn't stick their nose into any top-secret magistracy business. Finn was a magistracy-trained and certified wizard, so Atolf left him alone. Meanwhile, Tara and Paxton reached the small lake created by what was left of the Broken River. The area was a barren wasteland with a pillar of stone rising from the lake and some old buildings on top of the pillar. They took an abandoned boat to the pillar of stone, fighting off some strange water monsters along the way, and eventually they were able to climb to the top of the pillar. They found a monastery there, as well as a halfling who said she had been stuck there for years. Her name was Athelflaed, and she joined the party because she apparently didn't have anything else to do. She said she had joined the Order of the Monks there, but she had some suspicious rogue-like skills as well. The party explored the monastery, but there wasn't much to it. The only room of interest was reserved for observers and wouldn't open. Oh, did I not mention observers? From the beginning of our world, there were people who always seemed to be present at important historical events. They were each said to have a gem embedded in their body somewhere, and sometimes people saw them just stop and pray or even meditate. Eventually, people began to suspect they were causing big historical events, battles, natural disasters, plagues, rather than simply being there when they occurred. You know how superstitious people can be. So, of course, the next thing that happened is people started hunting them down. As far as anyone knew, there weren't any observers left at this point. Where was I? Oh, right! The party had discovered a room reserved for observers, but Paxton kept fainting when he tried to open the door. Returning to New Tower, the party met with Finn and did some shopping with a strange fellow, Sigbert, who owned a magic shop. His shop was really just a facade, with a portal to another location, and most of his goods were somewhere between useless and annoying. But remember him. Sigbert will pop up in the story again. They decided to get through that frustrating door in the monastery, and with a bit of help from everyone else, Paxton was eventually able to wrench the door open without fainting, and inside they found a room with gems on the walls and a sort of altar. They removed some of the gems, but then Paxton realized that some of the gems, when pressed in the right order, opened a secret door leading down under the monastery. There the party found several undead shadows which called Paxton an observer and attacked. The party defeated them and found a room with some magic items and a letter addressed to someone named Frith. This Frith fellow sounded like a real jerk. The letter writer said she was headed to the Great Forest, but Paxton, Tara, and Athelflaed didn't think this was anything worth following up on at the moment. Tara pressed Paxton to talk about why those shadows might have called him an observer, and Paxton shared something he had been keeping secret. A couple of years ago, he had woken up in a cave surrounded by dead armed men with a headache and a dent in the back of his head, and no memory of anything that had happened up until that moment. The party began to suspect he was an observer who had lost his gem, but Paxton seemed resistant to the idea. That evening, it rained heavily, and this brought out more blobs like the one they had previously fought as it tried to eat a farmer's grain. They defeated a group of blobs in the ruins of a temple of Foresight, the only named god the world had ever known. The conventional wisdom was that Foresight had either never really existed or had died. Our heroes had managed to collect a couple of famous sayings that were supposedly from this god, but they weren't sure of their significance, if any. Maybe the cult of Foresight just made it all up. They still had some grain to deliver, so they continued northward to the magistracy town of Zauberfeld, where they dropped off the grain. They also talked to the Duke, who ruled the town, and learned that there was a powerful undead in the nearby graveyard who harassed the town every night. They decided to track down this undead, learning that he was named Carlton the Cruel, and that he was angry that the aqueduct running through town was dripping water into his tomb. They let the Duke know, and he told them he had another problem they could deal with. A chimera was attacking travelers on the road north of town. The heroes agreed to deal with the monster, and they did. It was a difficult fight, but they defeated the beast. They did not return directly back to Duke Geralf. However, instead, they continued north to talk to a famous wizard known as Mun the Immortal, who they heard might know more about the Broken River. Arriving in the town around Mun's tower, known as Munville, they encountered a small construct made of cloth sweeping the streets, and the town's residents all gathered around the tower. Tara, Athelflaed, and Paxton felt pity for the filthy construct, Lumpin the Rag Golem, and he'll come up later again. Mun the Immortal appeared to be a suit of animated armor with vines moving inside him, and he had a ridiculous voice, which prompted Finn to laugh at him. Insulted, Mun demanded the party to go inside his tower for a stern talking to. The party pressed him for answers to their questions, but he said he would only help them if they would do something for him. One of his students, Tor, had gone to a magistracy research facility at the western wall of the world, where there is a giant bubble in the glass wall. Tor had disappeared after sending some worrying messages. He wanted the party to follow the path under the aqueduct, through a forest, and all the way to the wall. The party agreed, but asked that Lumpin, the Rag Golem, be freed to go with them. Mun agreed. After a long journey, a fight with some owl bears, and some suspicious nighttime traffic on the aqueduct, they arrived at the research facility, just in time to stumble upon the scene of a murder looking suspicious. Atolf, the gray-cloaked wizard who had been following them, was here, investigating the facility. They presented evidence that they had been sent by Mun the Immortal and were allowed to begin investigating the facility. They quickly discovered that the administrator in charge, a Minister Klemperer, had been using an old machine to melt a path through the wall of the world into the glass bubble. He had killed researchers who discovered his scheme, and Klemperer tried to kill our heroes using the machine. But they escaped, and an exciting boat chase ensued, when Klemperer attempted to flee down the aqueduct, shouting at them about how they were all trapped and needed to escape this dying world. Tragedy struck when Finn MacCaspiner, that brave little gnome wizard, was killed by a fireball cast by Klemperer. Tara used a potion given to her by Mun the Mighty, and she magically and temporarily merged with Paxton to form an enormous Etin. Together, they smashed Minister Klemperer, and his corpse changed shape, revealing that he had been a doppelganger. They suspected he was also a member of a cult known as the Glassbreakers, a group whose goal is to break through the walls of the world. Returning to Mun's tower, the party explained their findings to Mun. He revealed that his silly voice was an act, and told them what he knew about the things they had been investigating. He said that he suspected Paxton was an observer. He had heard that the last observers were hiding out in the Great Forest in the City of Two. Most importantly, he revealed that there were several sayings of the supposed god of foresight that they hadn't yet heard. To summarize the sayings of foresight: don't break the walls of the world, and when the river breaks, your world has maybe 50 years left, so consider escape. But Mun suspected there were more of these sayings, and he wanted the party to travel to yet another bubble in the glass, the Eastern Bubble, where some researchers said they could find the rest. They would have to travel through the Iron Empire to get there. They also received the news that another of the world's rivers, this one adjacent to the Iron Empire, had started to break. Mun said this was bad news and might bring war, as the Iron Empire struck out in pursuit of water and other resources. The party went back to Zauberfeld, and having decided to go to the Great Forest to follow up on what had happened to the observers, they paid Sigbert to let them use his magical shop portal to avoid a long journey. Arriving in the City of Two, capital of the Great Forest, they explored an abandoned tower once used by observers, and found more letters suggesting Frith, the person named in the secret underground observer chamber near New Tower, was a dangerous and possibly insane fellow. They decided to go to a city council meeting to ask about observers, but when they stood up to speak, the city council was shocked and immediately identified Paxton as Frith. Oh my god, what a crazy twist! The party was thrown in jail and interviewed by Zentha, a member of a secretive Great Forest organization known as the Greencloaks. During their imprisonment, a brave, handsome, talented, half-dark elf bard known as Aster Fortuna, that's me, intervened on the party's behalf. I managed to sneak Athelflaed out so that she could help me with some burglary. That's how I obtained this wonderful musical instrument, the guitar of the bazaar. In exchange for her help, I helped Athelflaed spring the entire party, and we escaped back through Sigbert's portal. I could see that Terra, Paxton, and Athelflaed could use my help, so I nobly and selflessly decided to join them on their adventures. Also, I needed to get out of the city, where I was wanted for burglary. You see how smart and intuitive I am. This time, we exited Sigbert's shop in the Iron Empire in the city of Drongledoon. The city was a bit run down, and an innkeeper invited us into his inn, saying we were violating the curfew. He eventually showed us a secret underground tavern where guests were enjoying themselves with music and games. My kind of tavern. We decided to hire a halfling barbarian named Epilema as a guide who could lead us to the Eastern Bubble. In the morning, we went to the market square to buy some goods as a favor for the innkeeper, but we were accosted by the city guard and a troublesome official. I used a charm spell to make the official more cooperative, and we fled back to the inn. Clever of me, wasn't it? Unbeknownst to us, a halfling spy followed us back to the inn, so once the charm spell wore off, the official and a large group of guards raided the place. Unfortunately for the guards, the inn's guests were a mix of sorcerers, barbarians, and various unsavory types. We fought our way out, with some help from Epilema, the barbarian, and then fled out of the city. I also killed some guards, and I felt pretty bad about it, but I was helped to get over it. On the way out, I brilliantly distracted some guards using using a cantrip to cause them to soil themselves. Epilema didn't think much of my distraction, but she was probably just jealous. Who wouldn't be? I am an amazing bard-like thief. After a long journey east, the party eventually arrived at the Eastern Bubble. There, we found an enormous stone with the complete sayings of Foresight. According to these sayings, to escape the world, someone needed to break the soul jar. The freed souls would know what to do. Foresight claimed that he used the last of his power and died for the sake of the residents of the glass-guarded world. Weird, huh? We weren't sure what to make of it either. We were attacked by a group of undead while encamped by this stone, and we found evidence suggesting that we'd been tracked there by Iron Empire forces. We headed back towards civilization, but along the way, we found an abandoned dwarven house where we fought more undead and discovered a magical weapon, a war pick named Chainbreaker, that was particularly good at destroying restraints, such as handcuffs or manacles. Returning to the city of Drungladoon, we skirted the city walls and went straight to the port. Epilema said she would create a distraction so that the party could board a boat and sneak away from the Iron Empire soldiers. But it looked to us as though she was trying to turn us in and accidentally got into a fight. We nonetheless managed to get on board a boat crewed by some sailors Paxton, Terra, and Athelflaed had met before. The captain, known as Shortbeard, managed to elude some pursuing Empire ships and drop us back off at Magistracy Port. We made our way back to Zauberfeld, where we checked in on Carlton the Cruel, verifying that the Duke had finally fixed the leaky aqueduct. We made our way to Munville and filled Mun in on all we had learned. This was my first time meeting him, and let me tell you, he's a pretty strange guy. Eventually, we agreed with Mun, without saying so directly, that Terra, Paxton, Athelflaed, and I would go to a rival and try shattering the soul jar, as per the words of Foresight. We traveled back to a port, caught a ship to a rival, and were surprised to find an Empire blockade of the city. It seemed the Emperor had decided to start his push to seize valuable resources from the rest of the world. We managed to run the blockade, and once in arrival, we headed straight for Terra's lovely family home. Terra's family was delighted to see her, and they expressed their condolences about Finn. They were also happy to meet me, and I think I made a good impression on them. I'm not sure if Terra caught on to how highly they thought of me, though. And really, everybody thinks highly of me, I believe. Plans were made to hold a party to celebrate her return, but we decided to slip away during the party and attempt to destroy the soul jar. Dressed in disguises or hiding in the shadows, we managed to evade or ensorcel the soul jar's well-meaning guards and repeatedly strike it until it shattered, releasing a cloud of souls. Each of us was confronted by a ghostly spirit that offered a hand and a promise of escape. And we were lifted up and out of the world, quickly increasing in size. We were deposited in a stone hallway, and the metal lid slammed back down onto the world as the souls dissipated. We weren't alone either. Around 50 other people were also crowded in the hallway, standing next to an enormous glass container that housed their world. Further down the hallway, we could see more large glass containers and a section of collapsed ceiling with twinkling lights high in the sky above. That was the end of part 1 of our story. Exciting and strange, I know, but there's more. Would you like to hear what happens next? You can start at episode 41 if you want to continue the story from there, or go all the way back to episode 1 if you'd like to hear the whole story in detail. Unfortunately, I don't make my appearance until around episode 25. But don't worry, there's plenty more of me after episode 41. You'll even get to hear me perform a few awesome songs. Oh, sure, there's still more about Terra, Paxton, and Athelflaed too. Thank you for listening to my epic tale. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and all the usual places podcasts are found. You can visit our website at tftggw.com and find artwork and maps there. We can also be found on Twitter as TFTGGW or on Facebook as facebook.com/Tales from the Glass Guarded World. Finally, you can email us at tftgggw@gmail.com. We hope to hear from you soon. This is Aster Fortuna, Bard Extraordinaire, bidding you a fond farewell.